The Woodwinds family of instruments gets its name from the fact that, with one exception, all of them were originally made of wood, and the fact that you use your breath or your wind to play them. They are a wind instrument or an aerophone. Now, all of the wind instruments that we'll look at today consist of some sort of hollow shape. The recorder is one you might be familiar with, and it's the most basic woodwind instrument. You blow gentle air into the mouthpiece, and it consists of a long tube, long skinny tube, with several holes over the edge that you place your fingers on to change the pitch. The more holes that are covered up, the farther the air has to travel and the lower the pitch. Now, the recorder is not really used in band or orchestra, hardly ever, so our first instrument we will look at is the flute. The modern flute is not made of wood anymore. It's made of metal, usually silver, sometimes even gold, if you get a really expensive flute. And instead of just holes to cover, it uses all sorts of keys and levers to close or open the holes. Now, the flute is a little different from some of the other woodwind instruments because it does not use a reed. We'll talk about the reed with the other instruments. Instead, the flute's head joint has a little lip plate and a hole that is played by blowing across it, just like you would blow across a bottle if you've ever tried that to get a sound. If you position your lips over this hole and blow straight across with the right mouth shape or embouchure, it will make a whistle sound. With just the head joint, sounds a little bit like a train. Now, when you put it into the rest of the instrument, the body and the foot joint, that will help the sound resonate better. And the more holes that you cover up, the lower the sound will go. I'm not a particularly good flute player, but I want to show you how that because you have to blow across the instrument, you have to learn to manage your breath very carefully to be able to play with good tone. I had to take several breaths in there because I'm not a particularly good flute player. So this is the flute. Our next instrument from the Woodwinds family that we're going to take a look at is the clarinet. Now, the clarinet is usually made of wood or sometimes plastic for the less expensive ones. Mine is a plastic one. And just like the flute, it has all of the keys to cover up the different holes to change the pitch. But different than the flute, it has a mouthpiece at the top and a bell at the bottom. It's a hollow tube, though, just like the flute. Something else that's different from the flute is the clarinet is the first of our single reed instruments. This is a clarinet reed, and if I hold it close, you can see that it is carved from a piece of reed cane very carefully so that it has a very, very thin tip to it. And this is what produces the sound for a clarinet. You attach it to the mouthpiece. Here's the mouthpiece, and you can maybe see that there's a little bit of an opening on this side. And you clamp it down over that opening. Once the reed is attached, you can see that there is just a very thin space between the tip of the mouthpiece and the reed, so that when you place your lips over the mouthpiece and blow through, that thin piece of reed will vibrate really fast, and that's what makes the sound for the clarinet. Because it's using the reed on one side of the mouthpiece, you have to make your lower lip stiff by rolling it over your bottom teeth, because it will be touching the reed on that side, and your top teeth can just touch the back of the mouthpiece. And then you blow with lots of pressure. Sounds a little squeaky without the rest of the instrument, so let's reattach it. And you can hear how the clarinet sounds with all of the pieces together. Just like the flute, generally speaking, the more holes that are covered, the lower the sound, and the less holes that are covered, the higher the sound. But there's lots of different keys to learn to press to play all the possible notes. So you have to learn your fingering charts really well and practice switching between them carefully. Let's see if I can play a scale on the clarinet. Now this is a good time to mention that woodwind players have to be very careful about eating food or drinking sticky, sugary drinks before playing their instrument. Because you're blowing with a lot of pressure and anything that's in your mouth could end up inside your instrument and cause problems with the sound or even get in there and get kind of gross. So they have to brush their teeth or rinse their mouth really well before playing their instrument. And it's important to clean it out after every time that you use it. So the different sections can come apart. I can take the mouthpiece and this barrel off, and you can see that there is the tube. And there's a little bit of cork on the end here that's been greased with some grease so that no air can escape between the joints. There's those joints. You can also separate here in the middle of the body to the upper and lower halves, and the bell can come off as well. Once the mouthpiece is off, you can use a swab to clean out your instrument. It's got a weight with the string that you can drop through, and then you gently but firmly pull it through to wipe out any moisture or dust or hopefully not food that's gotten inside of it to keep it clean. Our next instrument in the woodwinds family is, of course, the saxophone. The saxophone is a single reed instrument, just like the clarinet, and so the mouthpiece and reed are attached very similarly to each other and played the same way with the same embouchure with your mouth shape. Now, some people are confused by the saxophone because it is made of brass, just like most of the brass instruments. So they say, why isn't it a brass instrument and why is it in the woodwind family? It's in the woodwind family primarily because it is a reed instrument. It's got the wooden sound and uses your air. It's made of brass though because it was invented much later than most of these other instruments. So when it was invented, they were able to make it from brass the very first time. So it's the only one that was not ever made from wood. Just like all the others though, it has keys to cover up the holes. And because it's made of metal, it's a little heavy, so usually it's played with a neck strap to help hold some of the weight so you don't have to hold it with your arms. Let's hear a little bit of what the alto saxophone sounds like. This is the alto. There's also smaller ones that play higher or bigger ones that play lower. The ones that you usually see in beginning band are alto, tenor, and maybe baritone saxophone. So here's the alto saxophone. That shows off the saxophone a little bit. Again, I'm just a beginner, so I'm not very good at it myself. Our next woodwind instrument we'll take a look at is the oboe. Now the oboe at first glance might look like the clarinet, but there's a few things that are different. First of all, at the very tip, it is a double reed instrument, so you can see the reed is actually sticking out from the instrument up there. And then at the other end, the bell is shaped a little differently than the clarinet's bell. It still is made of wood, though, and has all of the metal keys to open and close the holes. I wish I had an oboe to let you listen to, but because it is a double reed, it produces a very different tone than the clarinet. The oboe might sound like this. I don't have an oboe to show you, but I do have an oboe reed. So I'll hold this close and you can see just how small this is and how there are two pieces of reed on the top and the bottom, and they're tied together with the string and attached to some cork so that it can slide into the top of the oboe. And if you look really closely, you can see that there is a gap there of space for the air to pass through. Because there is reed on top and bottom with a double reed like the oboe or the bassoon, you have to pinch really tightly with both your upper and lower lips with a very careful embouchure to get the sound to buzz. Because of all the pressure that I have to put to blow and get this reed to make some sound, it can be rather tricky to learn to play. So oboe is not usually started in beginning band. You'd usually start on an instrument like clarinet first, and then if you're ready for an extra challenge, you might switch to the oboe instead. Our final woodwind instrument we'll take a look at today is called the bassoon. The bassoon is a double reed instrument much like the oboe, but it is much longer and is usually played sitting down. Because it's so much longer, it produces the lowest notes of the woodwind family. Here are some pictures of the bassoon reeds and how the bassoon is played. You can see that it is much longer than any of the other woodwind instruments. That's why it plays the lowest notes. I also have a bassoon reed for us to take a look at. Just like the oboe, this is a double reed, so it has both a reed on the top and the bottom, bound together with some wire and some twine. Now it's quite a bit wider and longer than the oboe reed, so it has a lower pitch in itself, but you still have to get a stiff upper and lower lip to play the bassoon reed.